When starting a journey, it's important to start out at first light, so I'm going to lead with the light. This is Clara. Her name means light. Pure, clear light. And she was pure light. In some ways, telling the story now feels like I'm standing on top of a mountain, looking down at it. In the past 18 months, we have gone from being a family of 5 to a family of 4 to a family of 3. After fighting for almost a decade and giving our all, we lost both of our daughters within 1 year. It's been 6 months since Clara passed and a year and a half since Anna did. But the Lord has given me such peace and grace. In some ways, I feel far removed from the deep agony of the situation. Sometimes I can't believe the struggle's over, and I don't want to remember how hard it was. But when I stand back and look over all of it, the bigness of it and the smallness of it, somehow I have the peace and the courage to go through it. Clara was born in Mexico during our adventure years. Like many first-time mothers, I did my fair share of reading on the subject. And the most helpful thing I read was this: for each woman, the most important thing she needs to know will be different. I would encourage a mother to ask herself, what is it I need to know to give birth? Her answer must be found within and not given to her by an expert. Each mother needs to find her personal, heartfelt question. That felt like quite the assignment, figuring out what I needed to know to give birth. Wasn't someone supposed to tell me that? But I figured it out. And here's the question I came up with. Will what I bring forth be light, be good? Will what I bring forth be light? When we go back and look at our history in light of times past, it's usually quite amazing how all things are working together for the good, even the hardest, most painful things. During that time, God really pressed on my heart Romans 8:22 through 28. And it's a passage talking about how creation itself is yearning for deliverance from sin and from suffering and just from this mess we're in here on this planet. All around us, we observe a pregnant creation, but difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pangs. But it's not only around us, it's within us. The Spirit of God is arousing us within. We're also feeling the birth pangs. These sterile and barren bodies of ours are yearning for full deliverance. That is why waiting does not diminish us any more than waiting diminishes a pregnant mother. We are enlarged in the waiting. We, of course, don't see what is enlarging us, but the longer we wait, the larger we become, and the more joyful our expectancy. Meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside, helping us along. If we don't know how or what to pray, it doesn't matter. He does our praying in us and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs and aching groans. He knows us far better than we know ourselves, knows our pregnant condition, and keeps us present before the Lord. That's why we can be so sure that every detail in our lives of love for God is working something into good. You can't make this stuff up, you know? And at that time, I really didn't even fully understand this. But it gripped me. And the pregnant imagery and this sense of yearning for something bigger, for glory, it really stuck with me. And now when I read it in hindsight, that my very own child was a picture of the suffering and the condition of this world that's just yearning for the Savior. There is no path we walk that Jesus hasn't already prepared for us. But sometimes we don't realize how thoroughly and gently He's prepared the way for us, how He's cleared the path. until we go through it and we look back. The other verse God gave me to confirm this question in my heart, the thing that I needed to know, was James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Years later, when Clara lost her eyesight, I lamented to the Lord, how can my child not see? A child who cannot see is a very personal blow to a mother who is an artist. Clara was born healthy and strong. Her first 3 months in Mexico were wonderful. Walking the cobblestone streets of our neighborhood with her bundled up on me, constant visits from friends and family. After finishing our last school year in Mexico, we returned to Colorado as a family of 3. Clara grew, and I grew, and our family grew. And we welcomed our second daughter, Anna Cecilia. I called her my tiny treasure. She was healthy and strong, and she looked like me. The girls danced and explored and sang. Things were good, except that Anna started having what were later diagnosed as anoxic reflex seizures. They were super scary, but basically what would happen is if she pinched her finger or stubbed her toe or bumped her noggin, which lots of little kids do that stuff all day, every day, she would just have this really intense reaction where she would take a big breath and then hold her breath until she was blue in the face. And then she would pass out. Like, she'd hold her breath so long, she passed out, like, just limp. And then a few seconds later, she'd go, and take this big breath. And her face had gotten kind of purplish. And then she'd start like twitching, like her arms would twitch and her eyes would twitch, sometimes her legs too. And so I would hold her little body and just, I can't describe to you how it was, like the adrenaline and the fear and all these things that race through your body, and it all happened so quickly. So this happened, I don't know, over the course of about a year and a half. We probably had hundreds of these episodes. So we got pretty good at dealing with them, but they were terrifying. Most of the seizures after she came to were in the 1 minute to 2 minute range. Sometimes they went longer. I called 911 to the house many times. I became good at dealing with them, and if it was a short one, I just knew that's how it was going to be, and I just needed to wait it out and she would be fine. But the longer ones, there was like a 7-minute one and an 8-minute one, and once there was like an almost 10-minute one. And of course, on any of them, I always called the paramedics and they always came, and she was always fine. So of course we took her to the doctor during all of this. We got the, you'd think with as many EKGs and EEGs as my daughters have had that I would remember which one's which, but I always had to think which is the heart and which is the brain. So anyways, she had the brain EE thing. Her brain was fine. The doctor said that these types of seizures she would outgrow before her 3rd birthday, and that they wouldn't do her any harm, that they were scary to watch, but they wouldn't do her brain any harm. And so he offered us some medication, but he said we didn't have to take it, and we declined. And he said, yeah, just write it out and she'll outgrow these. And that's what we did. And she did outgrow them, but it was so terrifying, and it really did a number on me. So managing this changed me. It definitely made me more controlling. I felt desperate and out of control. When I look back on all the medical things I've gone through with my daughters, it strikes me that this actually feels like one of the darkest times, even though from a medical perspective, this was one of the least harmful things that happened. But it was the first thing, and it was terrifying. Holding Anna's limp little body in my arms felt like holding death. Can you imagine? This completely unhinged me. One day I was walking through my house, and there was a black crayon on the table. And I grabbed the crayon, and I just furiously started scribbling all over the wall, the fear and the rage just pouring out. A public announcement on my wall to my household. I was not okay. During this time was the first and only time I've ever sought outside help For several months, I worked with a counselor who helped me work through the darkness, showed me how to push it back through my stories, my art, prayer. My prayers became stronger and my voice became calmer, and I became more resolved that it would be okay. You know, she spoke over me the most life-giving words anybody ever has. She said, "You are a deep well." I knew even then that the only reason my well was so deep, my reservoir never ran dry, is because it was fed by the spring of living water, Jesus Christ himself.
Got a river life flowing out of me, makes the lame to walk and the blind to see, opens prison doors, sets the captive free. I got a river life flowing out of me, spring up a well, splish splash within my soul. Spring up a well, splish splash, make me whole. Spring up a well, splish splash, and give to me of life abundantly.
During the same time, there were also some things going on with Clara that were concerning. The first thing was she really tanked off of her growth curve, and the pediatrician noticed and said, "Oh, wow, her growth curve was way up here, and it's, really, it's not about the size, but it's about the falling off of your own growth curve. You need to see an endocrinologist." So we did see an endocrinologist, and she had all the tests for like human growth hormone and bone age and all of that. And at the end of the day, they said, well, all of her hormone levels are normal. We don't know why she tanked off of her growth curve. Idiopathic short stature, which means we have no idea why your child isn't growing, and, check in with us in 4 months or whatever. We also noticed that when she was working on fine motor activities, that her hands were shaking just ever so slightly. And so we were referred to a neurologist. It was actually the same one that had done the tests for Anna. And he said that it was a familial tremor, which is basically just a tremor upon intention. So like if you're carrying a glass of water, like when you get out here, you're going to shake. Something like that. He said that most people with that, as they grow up and their muscles get stronger, they kind of learn to compensate, and it's not really a very big deal. So we thought, okay, well, that doesn't sound horrible. So we just kept living life. Also around this time, Clara's speech patterns started to change. I can't really describe how it was. I mean, she could say all of her words. She was very easy to understand, but there was this certain like rhythm and cadence to her speech, sometimes a repetitiveness or a slowness that we were noticing. We thought, that doesn't sound normal. So we checked with the doctor, and they said just to see a speech person. The first speech person that was available to us was at the school, and when Clara read for this therapist, Clara learned to read when she was 4.5 years old. She was a brilliant reader. She was reading Laura Ingalls Wilder books when she was 5. I mean, it was amazing. And any word in isolation she could read and pronounce just fine. The speech pathologist just said, hey, I don't really think she has a problem. I can't isolate what this might be. I don't really hear it. If you're still concerned about it, come back in a year. And kind of the last thing that was going on at this time was Clara developed a fear of heights. She used to go climb up on all the playground equipment and just have a fun time and do all of that. But we started to notice she didn't want to climb up on the playground equipment. And then she would refuse to go up large staircases, like big staircases in buildings or like church. And she would go up and down the steps at home just fine, but any big open railing type staircase she was absolutely terrified of. And we thought, this is really strange. So basically we had all of this checked out by the different specialists, and everyone said, hard to say, doesn't seem like that big of a deal now. Give it a little time, check back later, and we'll go from there. So we did that. We decided to give it some time, and Anna's seizures stopped, which is a good thing because her baby brother was coming. And so just a week before Anna's 3rd birthday, Isaac was born. And just like that, We were a family of 5. A favorite phrase I used during this time, when I was so overwhelmed, was God creates order out of chaos, and He's teaching me to do the same. And I would take a deep breath, and I would say that God creates order from chaos, and He is teaching me to do the same, which was a good thing because I didn't realize it then. But all that was kind of like a little boot camp to train me for what was to come. Well, I think that's all it's going to be for today. See you next time. Dee da da